Have you ever wondered what happens when a web of perfect lies is torn apart by a single, undeniable truth? This isn't a story about a simple affair. This is the story of Amelia Hayes, 7 months pregnant and living a fairy tale life with her charismatic millionaire husband, Ethan Sterling. It's a story of ultimate betrayal, not just of vows, but of a future built on a foundation of deceit. But more than that, it's the story of what happens when the one you betrayed is the beloved daughter of Alistair Hayes, a man who doesn't just own empires, he commands them. Stay with me as we unravel how a single act of infidelity triggered a corporate war, a social annihilation, and a devastating revenge that proves that some lines should never, ever be crossed. The penthouse on Central Park West was less a home and more a statement. Its floor-to-ceiling windows drank in the New York City skyline, reflecting a life of curated perfection. For Amelia Hayes Sterling, this view was the backdrop to her dream. At 28, she was intelligent, graceful, and 7 months pregnant with her first child. Her husband, Ethan Sterling, was the architect of this dream. A self-made millionaire at 35, he had built his venture capital firm, Sterling Ventures, into a notable player in the tech investment world. He was handsome, ambitious, and to the outside world, utterly devoted to his beautiful wife. Their life was a meticulously orchestrated ballet of high society galas, weekends in the Hamptons, and spontaneous trips to Paris. Ethan showered Amelia with gifts, a vintage Cartier watch 1 week, a first edition Virginia Woolf novel the next. He would place a hand on her growing belly, his eyes shining with what she believed was pure, unadulterated joy. Our little legacy. He'd whisper, his voice a warm hum against her ear. Everything I do, Amelia, is for you and for this baby. But even in the most perfect cages, the bars can start to feel cold. The first hint of a crack in their flawless facade was almost laughably mundane. It was a credit card statement. Amelia, a former financial analyst herself, still managed their personal accounts. Tucked between a charge for a charity auction at the Met and a lavish dinner at Per Se was a name she didn't recognize, the Mercer Hotel Soho, 785 to 40,000. Ethan had been on a business trip to Chicago that weekend. He'd called her every night, describing the blustery wind off Lake Michigan and the tediousness of his investor meetings. He had no reason to be at a boutique hotel in downtown Manhattan. She brought it up that evening, her tone light, casual as she swirled a glass of sparkling water. "Honey, did you have a meeting at the Mercer last month? There's a charge here from the 10th. Ethan didn't even look up from his iPad, where he was scrolling through market reports. "Must be a mistake," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "The bank probably miscoded something. I'll have my assistant Jessica sort it out. Don't worry your pretty head about it." Don't worry your pretty head about it. The phrase, once a term of endearment, suddenly felt patronizing, dismissive. A cold knot formed in the pit of her stomach, right above where her daughter was kicking. She let it go, telling herself it was just pregnancy hormones, making her paranoid. A week later, another thread appeared. Ethan came home late from a networking dinner, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers. It was a subtle floral scent, L'Interdit by Givenchy. She knew it because her younger cousin wore it. It was a scent for a woman in her early 20s, not the wives of the aging banking executives Ethan claimed to be dining with. "You smell nice," she said, trying to keep her voice even as she helped him off with his coat. "Thanks," he said, kissing her forehead. "Probably just picked it up from someone in the restaurant. The place was packed." He was already walking away, loosening his tie, his mind on a hot shower and a glass of scotch. The excuses were plausible, but they were beginning to stack up like unread newspapers. There were the late-night texts he'd angle his phone away to read the sudden emergency work calls that took him out onto the terrace in the middle of dinner. His voice a low, urgent murmur she couldn't quite decipher. Each instance was a tiny pinprick in the balloon of her happiness. Alone, they were nothing. Together they were starting to let the air out of her life. The final undeniable thread came during a routine visit to her obstetrician on the Upper East Side. As she was leaving, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, she saw him. Ethan. He was half a block away, standing on the corner of Madison Avenue, laughing. He wasn't alone. He was with a young woman, a striking brunette with long legs and a chic all-black outfit. Amelia watched, frozen, as Ethan tucked a stray strand of hair behind the woman's ear, his touch lingering and intimate. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, passionate kiss right there on the sun-drenched sidewalk. The world around Amelia went silent. The honking taxis, the chatter of pedestrians, the very rhythm of the city faded into a dull roar in her ears. She saw the woman laugh, a bright, carefree sound, and link her arm through Ethan's as they walked into a chic little bistro. Amelia stood there for a full 5 minutes, her hand clenched so tightly on her purse strap that her knuckles turned white. The man who whispered promises into her hair at night, the man who called their unborn child his legacy, had just kissed another woman with a familiarity that spoke of countless stolen moments. The taxi ride back to the penthouse was a blur. The view of the city that had once filled her with joy now seemed to mock her, a glittering monument to a beautiful hollow lie. She walked into their home, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. She looked at the photos on the mantelpiece, their wedding in Tuscany, their charity work, their perfect smiles. It was all a sham. The gilded cage wasn't a home. It was a stage, and she had been the unwitting star of a one-woman show. The question was no longer if her husband was cheating. The question was, what was she going to do about it? And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was not a problem she could solve alone. She needed her father. Amelia didn't confront Ethan that night. The sight of him kissing another woman had shattered her reality. But a lifetime spent as Alistair Hayes's daughter had taught her one invaluable lesson. Never engage in a battle until you control the terrain. Emotion was a liability. Information was power. She spent the next 48 hours in a state of chillingly calm resolve. She went through the motions discussing nursery colors, smiling at Ethan's anecdotes about work, even allowing him to kiss her goodnight. But inside, she was a strategist, mapping out a campaign. The first step was to identify the enemy. She recalled the woman's face, young, sharp, with an air of ambitious confidence. She'd seen her before. A quick mental search, cross-referencing with company newsletters and event photos, brought up a name, Chloe Vance, a junior associate at Sterling Ventures, a rising star, Ethan had once called her. He'd praised her hunger and brilliant market instincts. Amelia now understood he wasn't just talking about her professional acumen. Chloe was 25, impossibly chic, and had been working closely with Ethan on a new fintech acquisition for the past 6 months. Knowing the who wasn't enough. Amelia needed the what, where, and how often. Crying to Ethan would only result in a cascade of lies and gaslighting. He would call her hormonal paranoid crazy. He would twist reality until she doubted her own eyes. No, she needed irrefutable proof. She didn't turn to a friend. This was too private, too humiliating. she made a single discreet phone call to a number her father had given her years ago for emergencies. The man who answered was Frank Miller, a private investigator whose gruff demeanor belied a meticulous, almost artistic approach to his work. He was ex-NYPD, with a network of contacts that ran through every doorman, valet, and maitre d' in the city. "Amelia," Frank's gravelly voice came through the phone. "Your father said you might call one day, hoped you never would. What's the problem?" Amelia, sitting in her pristine white marble bathroom, laid out the facts with the detached precision of a CEO outlining a hostile takeover. She gave him Ethan's name, Chloe Vance's name, the date of the Mercer Hotel charge, and the location of the bistro on Madison Avenue. "I don't want suspicions, Frank," she said, her voice devoid of tears. "I want a timeline. I want receipts. I want photographs. I want everything." "You'll get it," he promised. "Give me a week." The week was the longest of Amelia's life. She felt like an actress playing a part she no longer believed in. Every loving word from Ethan was a shard of glass in her ear. Every touch felt like a violation. She focused on her baby, talking to her, reading to her, creating a tiny protected bubble in the midst of the storm she knew was coming. Exactly 1 week later, a plain manila envelope was delivered by courier. Inside was a USB drive and a short typed note from Frank. "Amelia, I'm sorry. The evidence is comprehensive." With trembling hands, she plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen filled with folders, each labeled with a date. She clicked on the first one. It contained photos of Ethan and Chloe at a candlelit dinner at a secluded restaurant in the West Village, their heads close together, his hand covering hers on the table. Another folder showed them entering the Mercer Hotel, their arms around each other. There were receipts for gifts, a diamond necklace from Tiffany's, a designer handbag from a boutique on Bleecker Street. Things Ethan had never bought for her. The timeline stretched back 8 months. It had started just after she announced her pregnancy. The betrayal was staggering in its scope and audacity. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had been living a complete double life. The final file was a short audio recording captured by a discreet microphone Frank had paid a waiter to place on their table. Chloe's voice was light, girlish. "But what about Amelia? The baby is due soon, isn't it?" Ethan's reply was the blow that finally shattered Amelia's composure. He laughed. It was a low, dismissive sound. "Amelia is comfortable. She has everything she wants. The pregnancy is a complication, sure, but it solidifies my position with her father. Alistair would never rock the boat for his grandchild. After the baby is born and the new fund is closed, I'll handle it. I'll make it easy for her. She'll be well taken care of." Handle it. A complication. Make it easy for her. He wasn't talking about his wife and child. He was talking about a business merger. A problem to be managed. The love, the promises, the shared dreams. It was all a calculated performance to secure his standing with her father. She wasn't his partner. She was his collateral. That evening when Ethan came home, Amelia was waiting for him in the living room. The laptop was open on the coffee table, a single photo of him and Chloe kissing displayed on the screen. He stopped dead in the doorway, his briefcase slipping from his hand and hitting the polished floor with a dull thud. The color drained from his face. "Amelia, what is this? This is your life, Ethan," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "The one you've been living behind my back for the last 8 months." For a moment, he was speechless. Then the instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He launched into the script she had predicted. "This is not what it looks like. She's just a colleague. You're pregnant, your hormones are all over the place. You're misinterpreting things. Who gave you this? You've been spying on me. He was trying to make her the villain to turn her pain into paranoia, but Amelia was no longer the trusting, adoring wife. She was Alistair Hayes's daughter. "Don't," she said, her voice cutting through his excuses like a razor. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me. I have seen everything, Ethan. The hotel receipts, the gifts. I have even heard you." She played the audio clip. His own voice filled the silent room, callous and calculating, as he described his wife as a complication. The sound of his own words finally broke him. The facade of the devoted husband crumbled, revealing the craven opportunist beneath. His expression shifted from feigned outrage to pure animal panic. "Amelia, please," he stammered, taking a step towards her. "It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. It means nothing. You and the baby. You're my life. We can fix this. Please, don't tell your father." And there it was, the real fear. It wasn't the fear of losing her. It was the fear of losing his access to her father's world, her father's power, her father's money. Amelia stood up, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, a shield protecting her child from the poison in the room. She looked at the man she had loved, the man she had promised her life to, and felt nothing but a vast, empty coldness. "It's too late for that, Ethan," she said, her voice echoing with a finality that terrified him. "You didn't just break my heart. You threatened my child. You called my daughter a complication. You have no idea what you've just done." She walked past him out of the living room and into their bedroom, locking the door behind her. She picked up her phone. Her hands were steady now. She scrolled to a single contact saved simply as Dad and pressed the call button. The line connected after a single ring. Alistair Hayes. His voice was deep, commanding, even over the phone. "Dad," Amelia said, and for the first time a single tear traced a path down her cheek. "I need you to come home." Alistair Hayes did not get to be worth an estimated $60 billion by being a patient man, the founder and CEO of Hayes Global Conglomerate, a sprawling empire with interests in everything from shipping logistics and rare earth minerals to biotechnology and private equity, operated on a single principle: decisive action. When he received the call from his only child, his fiercely beloved Amelia, and heard the tremor of controlled pain in her voice, his world narrowed to a single point of focus. He was in Tokyo, closing a multi-billion-dollar deal on a new robotics firm. Within minutes of hanging up with Amelia, he had walked out of the final negotiation, leaving his stunned Japanese counterparts and his own board members in the lurch. He simply said, "Family emergency. My jet leaves in 30 minutes. Close the deal on my terms or we walk." He knew they would fold. They always did. 16 hours later, Alistair Hayes strode into the Central Park West penthouse. He was 62, but looked a decade younger, with a full head of silver hair, a custom-tailored suit that fit him like a second skin, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a force of nature. He radiated an aura of absolute power that made rooms feel smaller and other men feel inadequate. He found Amelia in the nursery, calmly folding baby clothes. She looked pale, but resolute. He enveloped her in a hug, his usual firm embrace softened with a tenderness reserved only for her. He didn't press for details immediately. He simply held her, letting her draw strength from his presence. "He's in the guest room," she said quietly, pulling away. "He tried to talk to me all night, pleading, apologizing. I locked the door." "Good," Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. Now tell me everything." Sitting on a small rocking chair, surrounded by the soft yellows and creams of the unfinished nursery, Amelia laid out the entire sordid story. She told him about the credit card charge, the perfume, the kiss on Madison Avenue. She handed him the USB drive from Frank Miller. Alistair plugged it into a sleek, impossibly thin tablet he produced from his briefcase and reviewed the evidence in silence. His face was a granite mask, but Amelia could see a muscle twitching in his jaw, the only sign of the tectonic rage building beneath the surface. He listened to the audio recording, his eyes narrowing as he heard Ethan Sterling, the man he had welcomed into his family, the man to whom he had entrusted his daughter's happiness, describe his pregnant wife and unborn grandchild as a complication and a stepping stone. When the recording finished, he placed the tablet down with quiet precision. The silence in the room was heavy, dangerous. "Where is he?" Alistair asked, his voice lethally calm. Ethan was a ghost in his own home. He hadn't slept, his expensive suit was rumpled, and his face was ashen with fear. When he saw Alistair Hayes enter the living room, he visibly flinched like a dog expecting a blow. "Alistair, thank God you're here." Ethan began, his voice slick with manufactured relief. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Amelia she's not herself. The pregnancy." Alistair raised a single hand, and Ethan's words died in his throat. "Do not," Alistair said, each word a chip of ice, "insult my intelligence or my daughter's. I have seen the photographs. I have read the reports. I have heard your voice discussing my family as if they were line items in a quarterly report. You did not have a misunderstanding, Mr. Sterling. You made a calculation, and you have miscalculated." He began to pace slowly, his footsteps silent on the expensive rug. "I vetted you, you know, thoroughly. Your financials were solid, your ambition was impressive, you were clever. I thought your cleverness was an asset. I mistook it for character. I gave you my daughter, my legacy, and you treated her like a stock option." Panic seized Ethan. "Alistair, I love her. I do. This other thing, it was nothing. It's over. I'll do anything to make it right. Counseling, anything." Alistair stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was something far worse. It was the detached, analytical gaze of a man about to liquidate a failed asset. "Let me explain something to you about my world, Ethan. In my world, we don't fix things that are fundamentally broken. We tear them down and build something new in their place. You are fundamentally broken." He walked over to the vast window overlooking Central Park. "Look at this," he said, gesturing to the city below. "You saw all of this, and you thought it was the prize. You thought marrying my daughter gave you a key to this kingdom. You are mistaken. My daughter is the kingdom. All of this," he swept his arm again, "is just the scenery." He turned back, his face set. "You have made two catastrophic errors. First, you betrayed my daughter. Second, you underestimated me. You seem to believe my primary concern would be avoiding a scandal for my grandchild's sake, that I wouldn't rock the boat. That is the logic of a small man. My grandchild will be a Hayes. They will be born into a dynasty of strength, not into a house of whispers and compromise. Their mother's honor is the foundation of that dynasty." Alistair pulled out his phone and made a call. "Eleanor, it's Alistair Hayes. I have a new client for you. My daughter." He paused, listening. "The retainer is unlimited. The objective is scorched earth. I want his assets frozen by morning. I want every clause in the prenuptial agreement enforced with extreme prejudice. And I want him out of this apartment by noon tomorrow." Ethan stared, horrified. Eleanor Vance was not just a lawyer. She was the most feared divorce attorney in New York, a legal piranha known for leaving her opponents with nothing but their shoelaces. "Alistair, you can't," Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking. "My company, my reputation." Alistair snapped his phone shut and slid it back into his pocket. He looked at Ethan with an expression of profound disappointment, as if observing a failed experiment. "Your company," he said with a dry, mirthless chuckle. "Sterling Ventures was built on seed money from my associates and propped up by the credibility of my family name. Your reputation was rented, not earned, and the lease has just expired." He walked to the door, then paused for one final devastating pronouncement. "You built your little sand castle in my kingdom, Ethan," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Now you get to watch me command the tide." He left the room, leaving Ethan Sterling standing alone in the opulent penthouse that was no longer his, the terrifying reality of his situation finally crashing down upon him. He had not just lost his wife. He had declared war on an emperor. Alistair Hayes did not wage war with cannons and trumpets. His methods were far more insidious and devastating. He waged war in the silent, sterile arenas of boardrooms, stock markets, and back-channel conversations. For Ethan Sterling, the first wave of the attack was not a dramatic confrontation, but a creeping, chilling sense that the world he knew was methodically turning against him. The first blow landed at 9:01 a.m. the next day. An email from the COO of North Atlantic Bank, his firm's primary lender, landed in his inbox. The subject line was "Urgent Review of Credit Lines." The email stated that due to newly identified market volatilities and a reassessment of portfolio risk, the bank was immediately calling in a $50 million bridge loan and freezing Sterling Ventures' operating credit. It was corporate jargon for a death sentence. That loan wasn't just crucial, it was the lifeblood of 3 of his major ongoing deals. Alistair Hayes held a significant, though not controlling, stake in North Atlantic Bank's parent company. It was a connection Ethan had once bragged about. Now it was a noose. He spent the morning in a frantic series of calls trying to secure alternate financing. Every door once wide open was now slammed shut in his face. Bankers who had eagerly taken his calls for years were suddenly in meetings or traveling. The invisible hand of Alistair Hayes was squeezing the life out of his company. The second blow was social. That evening was the annual Children's Health Foundation Gala, the glittering centerpiece of the fall social season. Amelia and Ethan were supposed to be co-chairs. When Ethan arrived, hoping to project an image of stability, he found his name and face had been scrubbed from the event. The programs had been reprinted. The seating chart where he was meant to be at the head table now had a prominent philanthropist in his place. When he approached a group of investors he'd known for years, they gave him curt nods and turned away, their conversations dropping to whispers. He was a ghost at the feast, a pariah in a tuxedo. The message was clear. You are no longer one of us. While Ethan was being publicly ostracized, Amelia was being shielded. Alistair had moved her into a sprawling suite at the Carlyle, a hotel he practically owned, and had her surrounded by a quiet but formidable team. A private nurse to monitor her pregnancy, a chef to handle her meals, and a personal security detail to ensure her privacy. He visited her every day, not to talk about the war he was waging, but to talk about the future. They discussed names for the baby plans for the foundation he was establishing in her name, and the new life she would build. "This is not about revenge, Amelia," he told her one afternoon as they looked out over the city. "Revenge is an emotional, messy act. This is a correction, a realignment of the universe to its proper order. He was a bug on the windshield of our life, and I am simply cleaning the glass." But Amelia knew it was more than that. She saw the cold fire in her father's eyes. This was about retribution. It was about ensuring that the man who hurt his daughter would serve as a permanent public example of what happened when you crossed the Hayes family. Meanwhile, Alistair's silent war escalated. He began a systematic poaching of Sterling Ventures' key talent. The firm's top analyst, a woman responsible for their most successful IPO, received an unsolicited offer from a rival firm for triple her salary and a corner office overlooking the bay in San Francisco. The offer was quietly backed by a holding company owned by Hayes Global. Within a week, Ethan's 3 most vital employees had resigned, taking their expertise and their client lists with them. His company was being hollowed out from the inside. The third and perhaps most brutal front in this war was legal. Eleanor Vance Amelia's new lawyer moved with terrifying speed. She had successfully argued for an immediate and total freeze on all of Ethan's personal and business assets pending the divorce settlement. Ethan found his personal bank accounts locked. His credit cards declined. He couldn't even pay for his own lawyer. The prenup he had signed, which he thought was a mere formality, was an ironclad document drafted by Alistair's personal legal team. It had a stringent infidelity clause that not only voided any claim he might have to Amelia's assets, but it also clawed back any significant financial gifts received during the marriage. That included the seed money for his company, which Alistair had funneled to him through a family gift structure. Legally, Eleanor Vance was arguing Sterling Ventures itself was a marital gift, and Ethan was now in default. Ethan was trapped. His business was collapsing, his social standing was gone, and he was financially paralyzed. He hadn't yet grasped the full horrifying scope of the attack. He still thought he was suffering a catastrophic run of bad luck, perhaps nudged along by an angry father-in-law. He hadn't yet understood that this wasn't a series of unfortunate events. It was a meticulously executed campaign of annihilation orchestrated by a master, and it was only just beginning. The silent war was about to get very, very loud. The silent war became a public execution on a Tuesday morning. The lead story on the front page of the Wall Street Journal's Money and Investing section was an exposé titled "Sterling Ventures, a House of Cards." The article was a masterpiece of character assassination cloaked in the language of financial journalism. It detailed with surgical precision the precarious financial structuring of Ethan's firm. It hinted at over-leveraged positions and questionable due diligence in his recent acquisitions. Most damningly, it quoted several anonymous, high-level sources from within the investment community who expressed grave concerns about Sterling's leadership and erratic personal behavior. The sources were, of course, all lieutenants of Alistair Hayes, feeding carefully curated information to a journalist Alistair had on his personal payroll for just such an occasion. The story didn't mention the affair. It didn't need to. It painted Ethan Sterling not as an adulterer, but as something far worse in their world, a bad investment, a fraud, a failure. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By noon, his remaining investors were in a full-blown panic, demanding their money back. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, announced a preliminary inquiry into his firm's practices, triggered by an anonymous tip. Sterling Ventures wasn't just dying, it was being dissected in a public autopsy. beaten and cornered. Ethan did the one thing he had left to do. He drove to the Hayes Global Conglomerate headquarters, a monolithic tower of black glass and steel in Midtown that seemed to blot out the sun. He bypassed the front desk using his old, now deactivated family access card to get to the executive elevator. He rode it to the top floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found Alistair in his office, a cavernous space with a singular, priceless Jackson Pollock painting on one wall and a commanding view of the entire city on the other. Alistair was on the phone, his back to the door. He didn't turn around. "Ethan, I knew you'd come," Alistair said, still looking out the window. "Punctuality in the face of annihilation. It's an admirable, if useless, trait." He finished his call and turned his face calm and unreadable. "You did this..." Ethan choked out his voice raw. "The bank, the gala, my employees, the Wall Street Journal. This was all you." "I did not," Alistair corrected him calmly. "You did this. You lit the match. I simply control the wind." "This isn't a correction. This is destruction," Ethan yelled, his composure finally cracking. "You're ruining me." "For what?" "A mistake. People have affairs every day." Alistair walked slowly toward his massive mahogany desk and sat down, steepling his fingers. "You are still thinking on such a small scale. This isn't about the affair, not anymore. That was merely the catalyst. This is about your fundamental character flaw. You saw my daughter as a means to an end. You saw my family as a ladder. Men like you are a virus, Ethan. You attach yourself to success, and you drain it for your own sustenance. I am not just destroying you. I am performing an exorcism." Desperation clawed at Ethan. "What about Chloe?" "The girl I was with, is she next?" Alistair's expression flickered with something cold. "Ms. Vance has already been dealt with. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the managing partner of the law firm, where her aunt, a rather prominent judge, is a senior partner. The second was to the dean of her alma mater, to which I am a considerable benefactor. I explained that a person of her moral character was a potential liability. Her offer for a coveted position at Goldman Sachs has been rescinded. Her name has been quietly blacklisted at every major financial institution in this city. She will be lucky to get a job balancing the books at a bodega in Queens. She like you made a bad investment." The sheer breathtaking scope of Alistair's power was laid bare. He didn't just move money. He moved the entire board. He could end a career with 2 phone calls. Ethan sank into one of the leather chairs opposite the desk, a broken man. "Please, Alistair. Stop. For Amelia's sake. For the baby. Think of the scandal this will cause them." It was the wrong thing to say. Alistair leaned forward, the calm mask dropping to reveal the fury beneath. "You will not use my daughter or my grandchild's name as a shield. The only scandal here is you, and I am erasing you. By the time I am finished, Ethan, your name will be a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. A lesson parents teach their sons about hubris. You will have nothing. Your company will be a bankrupt shell. Your reputation will be radioactive, and your name will be a synonym for failure." He stood up, the audience concluded. "My security team will escort you from the building. Your presence is no longer welcome here or anywhere in my world." As 2 large men in sharp suits entered the office, Ethan looked at the man who had once been his father-in-law. He saw no mercy, no regret. He saw only the icy resolve of an emperor protecting his dynasty. The glass house he had so carefully constructed had not just been shattered. Its shards were being ground into dust, and he was being buried under them. The descent from millionaire to pariah was brutally swift. Within a month, Sterling Ventures was forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The gleaming office in the Seagram building was shuttered, its assets liquidated for pennies on the dollar to pay off creditors. The penthouse on Central Park West, which had been in Amelia's name, was sold. Ethan was left with nothing but a few designer suits and a mountain of personal legal bills. He moved into a soulless corporate rental apartment in Jersey City, the glittering Manhattan skyline now a distant, mocking reminder of the life he had lost. His friends, the ones who had clapped him on the back at exclusive clubs and golf courses, no longer answered his calls. He was a social leper, a financial contagion to be avoided at all costs. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on him day and night. Meanwhile, Amelia was moving in the opposite direction. Freed from the suffocating perfection of her old life, she began to flourish. Her father had fast-tracked the launch of the Hayes Foundation for Maternal and Child Health, a philanthropic endeavor they had once discussed in abstract terms. He didn't just give her a title, he gave her real responsibility. She threw herself into the work, her background in finance proving invaluable. She met with doctors, researchers, and community organizers, her passion and intelligence shining through. The pregnancy was progressing well, and she found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She wasn't just Alistair Hayes's sheltered daughter anymore. She was Amelia Hayes, a future mother, and the driving force behind a major charitable foundation. She was building a legacy of her own, one based on substance, not style. She rarely thought of Ethan, and when she did, it was with a strange detached pity for the smallness of his ambition. One evening, desperation drove Ethan to make one last pathetic attempt. He showed up outside the Carlisle, waiting for Amelia to return from a foundation meeting. He looked terrible, thin, unshaven, his expensive coat hanging off his frame. "Amelia," he called out as she stepped out of her car. Her security detail moved to intercept him, but she held up a hand. "It's all right, Tom," she said, her voice calm. She faced her estranged husband under the warm glow of the hotel's awning. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice raspy. "For everything. I was a fool. I lost the most important thing in my life. I know it's too late, but I needed you to hear it." Amelia looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. For a moment she tried to see the man she had fallen in love with, but he was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out shell. His apology didn't ring of remorse. It rang of regret for his own downfall. "I hear you, Ethan," she said softly. "But forgiveness is not something I am prepared to offer. My only concern now is the health and safety of my daughter. Goodbye." She turned and walked into the hotel without a backward glance, leaving him alone on the sidewalk. That rejection was for Ethan the final nail in his coffin. He was truly alone. Beaten broke and stripped of all dignity, Ethan spent his days in his barren apartment, obsessively replaying his downfall. He blamed Alistair, he blamed Chloe, he blamed everyone but himself. In his paranoid state, he started digging. He wasn't looking for financial data, he was looking for dirt. He scoured old articles, forgotten interviews, and obscure online forums about Alistair Hayes's early days. Alistair was a titan now, but titans always leave footprints when they climb the mountain. After weeks of obsessive searching, he found it. A ghost from Alistair's past. It was a story from the early 1990s concerning Hayes's hostile takeover of a rival shipping company. The company's founder, a man named Marcus Thorne, had died by suicide just weeks after losing his life's work to Alistair's ruthless corporate raiding. The media at the time had painted it as a tragic consequence of a brutal business battle. But Ethan found a comment thread on an old financial blog where a user claiming to be Thorne's former junior partner alleged that Alistair had used illegal tactics, insider information blackmail, to force the sale and ruin Thorne. The allegations were never proven. The partner had vanished into obscurity. But the whispers were there. It was a long shot, a flimsy piece of leverage, but it was all he had. In his mind, it was a lifeline. He believed he had found a crack in the Emperor's armor. He compiled his research into a single damning file. He would not go down without a fight. He would use Alistair's past to secure his future. It was a move born not of strategy, but of pure, cornered desperation. He requested one final meeting with Alistair Hayes, sending a cryptic message through a lawyer. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say about Marcus Thorne." For the first time in months, Alistair agreed to see him. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He was about to play his last card, unaware that he was walking into the final masterfully set trap. The meeting was not set in the cold corporate stratosphere of Alistair's primary office. Instead, Ethan was escorted to a small private library on the 30th floor of the Hayes Global Tower. The room was a sanctuary of old-world power, a stark contrast to the modern steel and glass that surrounded it. Walls were paneled with dark, rich mahogany and lined with priceless leather-bound first editions. The air smelled of aged paper cedar and the faint, pleasant aroma of Alistair's cigar from the night before. A fire crackled softly in a marble fireplace, its flames dancing across the faces of stoic marble busts of Roman emperors. It was a room that whispered of dynasties and long-held secrets, a room designed to make visitors feel their own insignificance. Alistair Hayes was standing by the fireplace, a heavy crystal tumbler of amber whiskey swirling in his hand. He looked entirely at ease, a king in his own private study. He turned as Ethan was shown in his face a mask of polite neutrality. Ethan, by contrast, was a frayed nerve ending in a wrinkled suit. He clutched a leather portfolio to his chest like a shield. "Ethan." Alistair's voice was a low, calm rumble that seemed to be absorbed by the books around them. "You requested this audience, citing a matter of historical interest, Marcus Thorne, a name I haven't heard spoken aloud in many years. I must admit, you've piqued my curiosity. Please enlighten me." This was it, the moment Ethan had rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. He felt a surge of desperate adrenaline, mistaking it for confidence. He stepped forward and placed his portfolio on a massive antique coffee table, opening it with a flourish. "I've been doing some research into your past, Alistair," he began, his voice gaining strength. "Specifically, your acquisition of Thorne Maritime in 1993. A brilliant, if notoriously hostile takeover. But the story has always been incomplete." He slid a sheaf of papers across the table, old press clippings, printouts from obscure financial forums. "I found things," Ethan continued. His eyes locked on Alistair. Whispers of insider trading. Allegations of blackmail used against Thorne's board members. And then there's the tragic end to the story. Marcus Thorne, a respected man, a pioneer in his field, utterly ruined. He lost his company, his reputation, his life's work. They found him in his study, dead by his own hand, just 3 weeks after you signed the final papers. A man driven to despair. Ethan leaned in, trying to project an aura of command. "I've made contact with his former junior partner, a man named Paul Ziegler. He's been silent for 30 years, but he's willing to talk now. to the SEC, to the New York Times. He's willing to tell the world how you really built your empire. He sat back, his heart hammering. This was his checkmate. He had found the rotten beam in the foundation of the Hayes Empire. A story like that. The great Alistair Hayes, the benevolent titan of industry, revealed as a corporate predator whose rise was built on the grave of a good man. It would be devastating. Think of the stock price. Think of your legacy. Think of what the world will say. He let the threat hang in the air. I believe we can come to a quiet, private arrangement that would be beneficial for everyone. An arrangement that would allow me to disappear, and for this unfortunate history to remain buried. Throughout Ethan's speech, Alistair remained motionless, his expression unreadable. He simply listened, his gaze steady. When Ethan finished, Alistair took a slow, deliberate sip of his whiskey. He set the glass down on the mantelpiece with a quiet click that echoed in the silent room. Then, to Ethan's utter shock, a slow, cold smile spread across his face. "Is that it?" Alistair asked, his voice laced with a genuine, almost pitying amusement. "That is the hand you've come to play. The ghost of Marcus Thorne." He walked slowly over to an ornate globe standing in the corner of the room. He gave it a gentle spin. "Your mistake, Ethan, is that you are an amateur historian. You read the headlines, but you failed to read the footnotes. You see, I haven't spent the last 30 years hoping this story wouldn't come out. I've spent it preparing for the day it would." He pulled a slim tablet from a drawer and tapped the screen. A section of the bookshelf behind him slid away, silently revealing a large integrated monitor. It showed a live feed of the building's main auditorium. It was filled with journalists, a podium at the front, bearing the Hayes Global logo. Ethan stared confused. "What is this?" "This," Alistair said, "is your legacy. When you sent your little message, my communications team began preparing immediately. You see, you haven't uncovered a scandal. You've simply provided me with the perfect narrative opportunity." He turned his full attention back to Ethan, his eyes glinting like chips of ice. "Let me fill in the blanks your research missed. Was I ruthless with Marcus Thorne?" "Absolutely. Business at that level is a blood sport. But Marcus wasn't a noble victim. He was a fraud. Your source, Paul Ziegler, failed to mention that Thorne Maritime was a sinking ship riddled with debt because Marcus was embezzling millions to cover gambling losses in Monaco. I have forensic reports from Deloitte dating back to 1994 that trace every single dollar to offshore accounts. Marcus Thorne killed himself not because I took his company, but because he was a week away from being indicted on federal fraud charges." The blood drained from Ethan's face. "And your star witness, Paul Ziegler." Alistair chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "Paul is a dear friend. He's currently on his 70-foot yacht, the Severance Pay, off the coast of Grand Cayman. The generous pension I pay him is contingent on a lifelong ironclad non-disclosure agreement. He takes my call every Christmas. He will not be speaking to you or the New York Times or anyone else." Alistair gestured to the screen where his head of power was now approaching the podium. "In 5 minutes I will go downstairs and give a press conference. I will announce the full funding for the Hayes Foundation for Maternal and Child Health in honor of my daughter and the impending birth of my grandchild. Then I will tell the story of Marcus Thorne myself. I will frame it as a brutal formative experience from my past that taught me the profound human cost of corporate warfare. And in his memory, I will announce the formation of a new $100 million wing of the foundation, the Thorne Center for Executive Mental Health and Crisis Support. I will turn your clumsy blackmail into a masterclass in corporate responsibility and philanthropic grace. The headlines won't be about a scandal. They'll be about my redemption." He walked until he was standing directly in front of Ethan, looking down at the broken man slumped in the chair. "Your mistake was never just the affair, Ethan. Your fundamental flaw is that you have no imagination. You look at a man like me, and you see money and power. You don't see the decades of strategy, the layers of contingency. You tried to fight a war of secrets with a man who has never had a secret he didn't plant himself. You brought a knife to a nuclear holocaust." His voice dropped, losing all its warmth, becoming a final devastating judgment. "You will receive no settlement. You will receive nothing. The world will forget your name. You are a footnote in a story that is ultimately all about me. You are the catalyst for my third act transformation into a benevolent philanthropist. For that, I suppose I should thank you." He turned away. "My security will show you out. Do not attempt to contact me or my daughter ever again. Your life as you knew it is over." Ethan was escorted from the building in a daze. He stumbled out onto the bustling New York street, a ghost invisible to the thriving city around him. He had been so comprehensively outmaneuvered, so thoroughly dismantled, that there was nothing left of him but an empty shell. He had not just been defeated. He had been erased. 3 weeks later, in a quiet, sunlit room at Mount Sinai Hospital, Amelia Hayes gave birth to a 7-pound, 2-ounce baby girl. She named her Lily Rose Hayes. Alistair was there, the ruthless corporate emperor, transformed into a doting grandfather. He held the tiny infant in his arms, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle, and looked at his daughter, her face glowing with a serene, powerful happiness he hadn't seen in years. "She's perfect, Amelia." He whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She's our future." Amelia smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "She is," she agreed. Later that evening, after her father had left, Amelia stood by the vast hospital window, holding Lily close. The city glittered below a sprawling universe of light and possibility. For months, that view had been a symbol of a life that was a beautiful lie. Now it was different. It was the world she was going to help her daughter navigate. The world she was going to help change through her work at the foundation. The fire of her husband's betrayal had burned down the gilded cage she had lived in, and from the ashes she had emerged not as a victim, but as the architect of her own life. She looked down at the sleeping face of her daughter, a legacy of love, not of deceit. Her new life, a real life, was just beginning. So what do we take away from the story of Amelia Ethan and Alistair Hayes? It's a powerful, brutal reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are world-shattering. Ethan Sterling's betrayal wasn't just a simple affair. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. He didn't just cheat on his wife. He tried to leverage a titan's most precious asset, his daughter. He learned the hard way that when you play with fire, you will get burned. But when you betray a king, he will salt the earth, so nothing can ever grow again. This story is about the ferocious power of a father's love, the resilience of a woman betrayed, and the cold, hard reality that in the world of legacy and power, loyalty is everything. What do you think, was Alistair's revenge justified, or did he go too far? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories of epic drama and sweet revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales.